America's consumer culture is pervasive. We're sold on products while watching TV, scrolling social media channels, and of course, actively shopping. You're watching Cheddar's Who Knew? I'm Hana Ostapchuk. Before ads were popping up mid-YouTube video, commercials were interrupting TV sitcoms. But have advertisers turned up the volume? Cheddar's Joseph Ruddleston explores the sonic side of commercials.
Once and for all, Jeep Pickup is going to show you which automatic four-wheel drive pickup has the best traction.
Normal automatic? What is with these loud commercials? I can't be the only one that gets a blast of noise at every ad break. I want to find out if I'm going crazy or if they really are louder.
Surprise, surprise, I'm not the only one who wants to put a stop to this. We watched a lot of TV in 2020 with plenty of those loud commercials. In fact, the Federal Communications Commission saw a 140% increase in loudness complaints. But in theory, we solved this problem 10 years ago. In 2009, Congresswoman Hana Ostapchuk was having a nice family dinner when a loud commercial blasted from the TV. Ostapchuk tells her brother-in-law to turn down the volume, and he says, "Well, you're the Congresswoman, why don't you do something about it?" She did just that, taking it to Congress with the Calm Act of 2012. Overwhelmed by the bill's popularity, Ostapchuk told the Wall Street Journal, "If I'd saved 50 million children from some malady, people would not have the interest that they have in this." I decided to hit mute during the ad break and find out why loud commercials are still very much alive, who's responsible, and what I can do to please make it stop. The first television commercial came in 1941 to 4,000 TVs.
America runs on Bolivar time.
By 1955, TV advertising had ballooned to a $1 billion industry.
She's going to have the best care a car ever had.
As television's popularity spread across America, more advertisers threw their hats in the ring, looking for any opportunity to stand out using music, color, animation, and, of course, volume. Something that would become particularly useful is a tool called dynamic range compression.
In a song or a recording, the difference between the loudest and quietest sounds, we'll call it the dynamic range, has to be within a certain range, or one of them is going to be compromised. The way that you handle that is usually by reducing the loudest sounds. So if you imagine a room, a little tiny room, very short ceiling, and you want to get a bunch of people in that room, some of the people who are too tall will have to crouch down.
As early as the 1940s, studio engineers were using dynamic range compression to balance the overall sound levels of a track for songs and movies, but mostly just for the listener's enjoyment.
Another reason you would use dynamic range compression might be to bring up the average volume. In media where we're competing for people's attention, loud sounds get more attention.
With the switch to CDs, engineers had so many more options for sound mixing. More dynamic range, but more effective compression too.
I'm a musician, so I use compression a lot in my songs. And here's a song that I have been working on that doesn't have any compression on it. Now here's the same song with compression added.
So when I add compression, all the quieter sounds and the louder sounds are meeting at a similar point. The variety in dynamics just turns into a nice balanced mix. It was only a matter of time before advertisers jumped in to make use of this tool themselves.
So, what does this all mean? Well, a lot of the ads technically aren't louder at all. They're just at a more consistent sound level, making them seem louder.
The ups and downs in the sound level of our shows sound naturally softer to our ears next to the non-stop noise of a compressed commercial. But why would advertisers subject us to this madness? Turns out we're able to hear 20 to 100 times faster than we see, meaning what we hear affects all our other senses. Basically, it's our ears that notice ads first, not our eyes.
Human ear can perceive sound ranging in frequency from a low of 20 to a high of 20,000 cycles or vibrations per second.
So, while the sound of a TV show or movie might be designed to bring us through a story with ups and downs and rises and falls in tension, ads have a different method. Commercials are designed to hit our innate attention response trigger, whether you're falling asleep or sitting down for dinner. Which brings me back to Congresswoman Eshoo and the CALM Act. The Commercial Advertising Loudness Mitigation Act set a new volume standard for TV advertisers, something called A85. Put simply, A85 stated that the average loudness of a commercial had to be roughly as loud as the average loudness of the programming between it. And they measure average loudness over time using LUFS, loudness units full scale.
Our perception of sound is complicated, and average volume doesn't tell the whole story. There's also the frequency-dependent nature of it. So LUFS are an attempt to compensate for the way our ear perceives loudness.
So while Spotify and YouTube have set their own sound to around -14 LUFS, A85 recommends -24 LUFS for TV. Say you're watching Vikings and you're hearing a variety of ups and downs in volume, Ragnar speaking quietly at the low level of about -24 LUFS, with the odd village raid bringing the levels up. At an ad break, A85 is designed to ensure that you're not blasted with the village raid level volume right out of the gate. The bill passed in 2010 and officially took effect in late 2012.
When I'm watching the game, I don't want those ads coming on loud.
That's right.
I don't want that to pick up the clicker.
But here we are, still sitting through these noisy ads. While the FCC doesn't actively enforce the measures, it works instead from complaints submitted by the public. And they got their fair share from 2012 to 2019 when almost 50,000 viewers complained to the FCC about loud commercials. So what happened with all those complaints? Well, the FCC will only make an investigation if the complaints they receive form some kind of pattern, of which they've found none. On top of this, there are a few ways advertisers could stay ahead of the CALM Act. In a 30-second commercial, advertisers might include 15 seconds of just silence or low-level sound. But then in those other 15 seconds, everything is twice as loud. So technically, this loophole does keep them within legal bounds, which means lots of noise, no laws broken. The FCC caught wind of this in 2014 and updated the fine print to remove silent or very quiet moments from a commercial's loudness average to avoid it. Starting the commercial at a lower volume before gradually increasing it throughout will do the trick. Again, same concept, legal noise level achieved. And most notably, the CALM Act only covers television, cable, and satellite. It doesn't have jurisdiction over any streaming services, which, in case you missed it, are rapidly taking over how we consume content. In late 2014, some companies like Pluto TV asked to be included in the CALM Act, gaining the attention of then FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler, who made a push to redefine the law to include all streaming services. It didn't go far, with the larger streaming companies like Amazon refusing outright. Without the majority of commissioner votes to pass it, and after Tom Wheeler was replaced as chairman by Ajit Pai, a no voter, the proposal died. And even if the FCC were to just change the definition of the CALM Act to include streaming services, it's bound to land them an unwinnable lawsuit. It would mean expanding the organization's federal power over a lot of private companies without going through Congress. With the FCC's hands tied, Congress would have to pass a new law. A decade after the CALM Act, Congresswoman Eshoo is looking for a solution with the help of the Audio Engineering Society. The society is a group of audio production experts determining industry standards. Right now they're working on a new one, AES 71. This new standard provides audio mixing guidelines recommended specifically for streaming platforms. It could bring an end to the unreasonable ad break loudness for good. And with enough support from Congress, another bill could reach the president's desk in the near future. While some streaming platforms are content with the way things are, there are others who have decided to start leading by example. Like Netflix, the one without ads. After reviewing their sound levels, they found the standards of their shows and movies were causing the dialogue to be much lower than the average volume. Netflix began using the dialogue volume as a base or an anchor for the overall loudness, rather than all the action and explosions. If we do the same for commercials, it could solve the loudness problem entirely, no more turning up for the dialogue. And it's not just Netflix that's paying extra attention to the viewer experience. After a drop in ratings, NBC reduced its ad minutes as other companies keep pushing for more. Now NBC's ratings are rising, potentially starting a trend of less is more for the future.
Look, I don't know when loud commercials are going to stop blaring noise at us, compressed or not, whether by preference or by law. But for now, there's always the mute button.
Full industries are built on skilled marketing, and the $22 billion deodorant industry is no exception. Joseph Ruddleston is back to tell us how advertisers convinced us we needed more deodorant.
It's happened to us all at some point. You've slept through your alarm and you're late for work. You rush out the door without putting on deodorant. No one can know. Rewind a few hundred years and you couldn't even pay someone to bathe, let alone use deodorant. Even King Louis XIV proudly claimed he'd only ever bathed twice in his life, the day he was born and the day he got married. So when deodorant first graced our stinking pits about 134 years ago, it was actually a lot harder to sell than you would expect. But today, it's an industry worth $22 billion. The real story of the rise of deodorant and antiperspirant comes down to clever marketing that targets the one thing that makes us human. This is your daily reminder to give yourself a quick sniff and subscribe. Let's just get this out of the way right now. Body odor is natural, but historically we've not been very good at talking about it. Well, at least not my people and the various offshoots. I want to start at the Victorian era, when the world was changing fast. With the advent of better plumbing and health education, there weren't as many excuses not to bathe. For the upper crust, body odor was handled with a dollop of perfume and maybe some sweat-blocking fabric shields, but lower classes had to accept it as a part of life. But after 6 cholera outbreaks swept through the 19th century, the world started to pay closer attention to personal hygiene, including smell. So it's surprising that the first deodorant, Mum, and I mean Mum like, hi Mum, came onto the market in 1888. They weren't exactly flying off the shelves.
It was innovative, and it's also really interesting that the original deodorant was in cream form, because people weren't really touching their bodies.
Rachel Weingarten is a beauty historian, and she's helping me trace back our fear of body odor to the source.
So if you talked about using Mum, that meant that you were intimately acquainted with your own body.
Despite personal smells becoming more of a concern, Mum just didn't seem worth the hassle. Washing regularly was working for most people, and people were coming out of a century of far worse smells than a bit of funk. Then, summer temperatures in the 1912 exposition in Atlantic City changed everything. Edna Murphy and her surgeon father were at a booth, selling their antiperspirant under the name Odor Ono. As the summer went on, exposition goers could not bear the sweat and stink, so Murphy and her dad left with $30,000 in profits to spend on promotion. Edna's advertising company paired her up with James Webb Young, a copywriter and a former Bible salesman who had no advertising experience. Young would eventually become one of the most prominent advertising minds of the 20th century. And it all started with his second idea. His first idea was pitching excessive sweating as a medical issue to be swiftly dealt with. Not bad. It boosted sales for a while, but by 1919, Young was under pressure to take things further. Women knew about the product, but didn't feel the need to use it. So he just got them to consider the social consequences.
Yeah, social embarrassment is basically what advertising is built on. Envy or embarrassment, I think we can say.
The concept was straightforward enough. A shame campaign convincing women that their smell is a regular talking point behind their back.
It just insulted everything you were, and it isolated you too. It felt very much like it was telling you one-on-one. Gosh, you stink.
After just a year, Odorono sales shot up 112%. When it was sold to Northern Warren in 1929, Young stayed with the brand. His next target? Men.
So the understanding was if you worked on a farm, if you were a mechanic, if you delivered milk, you were doing male pursuits.
What?
If you sweat, if you smell, that was part of your job.
Oh, I see.
But when the Great Depression hit in 1929, men began to add "smells fine" to their resume. Up until this point, the most men were doing to shield their natural musk was splashing themselves in some bay rum after showering, if anything at all. So naturally, deodorant targeted towards men didn't venture too far from their habits, like Seaforth, who sold their deodorant in a little whiskey jug. The marketing strategies of social embarrassment for women and masculinity for men persisted for decades. But then a new brand hit the market, and with it, a new strategy.
Why are women so happy about new Tickle antiperspirant? Is it because Tickle is the first roll-on with a big, wide ball?
What came next in deodorant was Tickle, which was a cult product. People loved it. They collected it in, I see you looking it up. They collected it in different colors, different scents. It was really the first time deodorant was seen as something playful and something you might add intentionally and willingly and not because you're nervous or scared.
For a while, advertising for women seesawed between the playful, confident Tickle ad style and the tried and true "you got a problem" method.
Let's go to the Power Shoulder 80s, where women were in the workplace and the deodorants became more sort of like little soldiers of, let's get rid of that smell, lady, before you go into the workplace with your pretend tie.
Meanwhile, products continue to define the smell of masculinity in ads like this.
For every man who wears Brute deodorant, there's a woman who'll be glad he did. Because a man who wears Brute deodorant is nice to be close to, and nobody knows that better than a woman. Brute, it smells like a man.
Great.
When I was growing up in the millennium, I watched ads for Axe body spray, or Lynx in the UK, and if you've heard of Axe, you probably know its reputation.
Your body produces stuff. It happens, you know, but it went from let us just cover up the odor to let's try to stop it entirely to our own time where people might inject Botox into their underarms to stop the sweat.
Keeping up with the modern public opinion, ads today are pushing a new buzzword: natural. Rachel showed me this ad for a natural deodorant called Lumi. It's got the silliness of Tickle and the shame of Odorono. It didn't surprise me to learn its ad agency made classics like Squatty Potty and Poopery. It did surprise me to learn that the product was made by an OBGYN. As we learn and talk about our bodies more, getting an edge in the competition means playing into our fears. Unlike deodorant, antiperspirant contains aluminium. Yes, I said aluminium, which blocks the sweat glands. Since the early 2000s, people started to worry that the aluminium could be linked to breast cancer. There's been no evidence of that, but when has lack of evidence ever stopped a rumor from spreading? So we flip reversed. First, we're told body odor is a social nightmare. Then we hear deodorant and antiperspirant can be a dream come true. Now the wrong antiperspirant could be harmful. It's time to ask the question: who needs deodorant? A common misconception is that the smell comes from sweat. In actual fact, it's only when bacteria mixes with the sweat that you start smelling. But there's a gene linked to this smell called ABCC11. It's the same gene that determines if the ear produces softer rather than flaky wax. When the gene is inactive, no BO. A study at my old university, the University of Bristol, in the early 90s, found that 2% of the women involved didn't have active ABCC11 genes, and so didn't produce body odor. Even so, 78% of those women still use deodorant regularly. In East Asian populations, a non-functioning body odor gene is incredibly common, as high as 95% of people. I wanted to know if I might be one of the lucky few Westerners, so I ran out of deodorant and just didn't buy more. According to the results, my gene is just lazy, but not quite inactive. I might stick to life without antiperspirant, but if I find myself out of a job, I am blaming the BO. So what does the future of body odor smell like? What brand has found the marketing sweet spot?
What will you wear today?
I think we should look at the Dove campaign, where it was less about what it smells like and less about making you feel badly about what your body does, and more about just being a product you can take with you through your day. I mean, how genius is that?
Advertising has gotten a lot more discreet since Beautiful but Dumb, and still we're more afraid than ever of the social consequences of body odor. Are deodorant and antiperspirant necessary? Who's to say? But if you're not sure, next time you have a free day, try going without. What's the worst that could happen?
Here at Cheddar News, we're in on the information market. This has been Who Knew, and I'm Hana Ostapchuk. Thanks for watching.